Welcome to Funds and Founders. This weekly show is tailored for Austin founders navigating the early stages of their entrepreneurial journey. I'm your host and fellow Austinite, Abhinav Sinha. If you're looking for the motivation and the insight needed to build a successful company, you're in the right place. Today we have on Simran Singh. He did his computer science bachelor's degree from Duke University. He's done a couple of AI and web internships before he co-founded Zogo, which was a financial education platform, an app for the Q2 ecosystem and other ecosystems. And then most recently, he's the founder of a company called SwayStack. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
One thing I'd like to start off with is asking, when did your entrepreneurial journey start?
I think really started probably with Zogo, and that was fully by chance. So I met Bullen, who's my co-founder and CEO of Zogo, just through Facebook. Duke Facebook. He was on the computer science page. I was like keeping tabs on that kind of stuff back then. And then like he posted, hey, free dinner to the Washington Duke Hotel, which is like the hotel where like all the rich alumni come in. When they go to the basketball games, they stay there. They like watch that. That's the hotel on campus. He was just offering free dinner for anyone who was interested in kind of working with him on his project and things like that. And at the time you could use your food points, like your on-campus currency to kind of go there. And so I was like, yeah, that sounds sick. I think I was a sophomore. I'd never been to the hotel to have dinner before or anything like that. And so I was like, all right, I'll go. And I met Bullen through that. And then 5 years later, we had left Zogo. We'd been working on Zogo for 5 years together after that. Yeah, it was just kind of a wild time. But I think that's probably where it really started. I'm trying to think if there's like, my dad is a like small business entrepreneur. So there's kind of always that environment there, I guess. So you could probably say, I could probably say that is reasonable too. My dad had an Indian restaurant. He still has an Indian restaurant, but just a different one now. But when I lived in Utah, I spent 7 years in Utah. We had an Indian restaurant there that I would work at when I was like in junior high.
Nice.
And so what I would do is like, I would want to buy things, but I'd never have money to go buy them. Cause like, how do you buy an Xbox if you're like in junior high? So what I'd do is like go to my parents and I'd pretty much say like, hey, let me do work so that I can have money to buy whatever I want kind of thing. Nice. And I think one of the, I guess that's entrepreneurial in some way.
Did you ever look at the ops of the restaurant? Did you ever try to figure out how pricing works, how inventory works, how many customers you need through the door to break even for the day? Or were you just like single laned?
Yeah, my dad would tell me about a lot of these things, so I'd get like some information that way. I don't know if I was like super innately curious about that type of stuff. Looking back, I probably should have been. But my dad was just good about like, this is an Indian dad, just telling me about the ways of the business while I'm heating up the rice or like moving things around or like prepping things in the back house.
Knowing what you know, would you ever start a restaurant?
I've thought about it. I think like, if I start a restaurant, it's because I want other people to start to love Indian food. Right, like I just want people to love. I love Indian food, and like that's why I would do it. I don't think it's like it's a hard business to do. It's just it's just tough operationally. Like I see it in my parents, and I also like if we built it bigger, like a fast food Indian casual kind of like chain-esque thing that's like a little bit more approachable. Yeah, I've considered that. I just don't know if I would do it. I feel like I've just spent so much time just kind of getting my footholding in software. It would be so weird for me to just like move. Not to do that, but I think it's fun. I think it could be cool. I think like I tell my dad a lot of this stuff too. Is like I feel like a lot of the best Indian restaurants I've been to kind of make it almost hard for someone who doesn't know how to order at Indian restaurants to be approachable. Like it can be hard. Like there's so many things on the menu, you don't really know what to do. Like I just think there's something there, and I
makes sense.
Yeah, I want to help fix it, but I don't know if I'll have the time or anything.
My take is, especially in the U.S., if I was to open an Indian restaurant, I want to do something that's fine dining. I want to do something that's an experience. Yeah. And like helps you understand the flavors, the taste, and everyone just gets vindaloo or butter chicken and like, cause they don't know what's there outside of like those 5 dishes that everyone talks about. Yeah.
No, that's a good take actually. I could see that popping off.
But then I don't know what the experience would be. Yeah. Right? And also then if it's more premium, you gotta keep it so limited and small that you're always full. You never want to be a premium restaurant that's half empty. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Trade-offs. But I think Austin's one place where I've seen very high turnover in restaurants. Yeah. Like stuff will open up and shut down all the time. Yeah. And so there's probably something about the business that you got to figure out by like, failing at it once. That's why I asked, but pretty cool. Going back to your journey of starting Zogo or being co-founder of Zogo, how did that come about? So you met this person at dinner. Are they like, hey, come join me? Or how do you go from there sophomore year to starting roughly 2017 or joining 2017?
Yeah, I think it's a very messy process because Bolin was also a freshman at the time. So it's like the blind leading the blind. And it's a tough experience. But looking back, like there's two things that stick out to me about the early days of Zogo. One is like, you kind of asked around this process, like, how do you know, like the process of joining? Like, how do you kind of make a commitment there? There's that perspective from someone who's considering working at a startup. And then there's also the perspective of like a founder at the startup deciding who their early team should be. Like it kind of goes both ways is what I'd say. And it's very messy. I think like for us, there were so many people that came in and out. I think probably at least like 20 people between like wanting to work with us either in an advisory role or as like a other student in a full-time role. Also college students, like I don't know how many clubs you joined and then didn't end up working on like that. Like there's a lot of that in college.
Shiny object syndrome, a lot of like, I like that, but I don't like it enough to like put the work in.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, there's just so many complex pieces of that. Like people are growing, like it's just a weird time. It's just a weird time to be alive when you're in college, you know, so it's just a lot of that. So like we probably had about 20 people who were between other students, like maybe even professors who were advisors, like adults who had jobs being advisors of like over weeks and months of like, hey, do we need to do this thing? Or like this person doesn't show up to meetings and it's like, or hey, this person is actively not contributing to these things. So like we don't need their help anymore kind of thing. And so I think one of the big takeaways is just that it's really messy and you just have to like, I think focus in, and it's kind of the job of the founder to kind of do this. It's like really hard. I wish I could give better advice and like, you just have to be good, right? Like you just have to be like meticulous about what really matters here. It's like finding, for us, it could just be like finding parents who wanted to kind of work with us. Our original idea for Zogo was kind of like a teen debit card for kids. And then parents would buy this card for their kids and it could help like automate their allowance as well as teach financial education tasks so that, well, we turned the word like Zogo paycheck at some point where we were like, okay, instead of just giving your money as an allowance, you have to like earn that allowance paycheck. You like learn about financial education. You like reflect on your transactions. You think about your spending, stuff like that, kind of having more technology enabled companies there. But it was like 2017, like we were two college kids. Like those are some businesses now, like Greenlight, if you've ever heard of Greenlight, like does that now. Step and Current are kind of in that space now too, but they're just not for parents really. They're just teen debit cards type of stuff. But so if that's the product, the app, like how can you meaningfully make impact, like meaningfully move forward towards that? It's like, okay, well, someone has to actually figure out how to make that all happen. Like you have to design that and then also like have someone who understands how to like have a debit card, ship all of that, build the application. And then from the parent, like from the selling side, you have to have families, you got to go to schools, you got to somehow wrangle together like beta earlier users. So either building product or selling product, right? Like, or people doing that. Like if they're not doing that, then the founder just needs to be like,
what are you doing?
What are you doing? Are they wasting my time as a founder to like, you know, make stuff like that? So like, I wish I could say that we did like a really good job. Bolin did a very good job, I think, relative to like what stage of the business and life he was in. Like he did a fantastic job doing that. I was kind of just like trying to do my best, building stuff and being useful. And then, so we had probably about 20 people in and out until it was eventually, it boiled down to 3 co-founders, like me, Bolin, and Simon. And then kind of kept growing the team from there.
Nice. What idea, you said you started with teen debit card. How many ideas did you go through until you reached what Zogo finally was?
Yeah, we spent two and a half years, probably something like that. So the original idea was teen debit card. We had designs for that. Like Bolin was pitching that all the time. And then we went to what was effectively like a task and chore app, no card. Our idea was like, hey,
you get paid to do stuff.
You get paid to do stuff. Yeah. We didn't ever set up ACH transfers, but we had built the app. It was on the App Store for a while. I don't think any of these, we had 2 other apps. We had 2 apps that were on the App Store. This is one of them. That I don't think they're on there anymore, but we had gone to the point where we had done pilot programs with schools, like in the local area. So we had at least 30 families that were a part or like, you know, invested in us, that knew about us, that we had like contacted the school, sent out surveys, gotten their addresses, things like that. Bolin did this really cool thing too, which is like, he wanted to just like show a token of appreciation to these families. So what we did was we bought pineapples. Pineapples was a big thing in like our logo. Like even inside the app, it's like a big thing. And so we bought pineapples and we gave them to people's houses and we like kind of delivered that and just left it on their front door. It can sound a little serial killer weird, but like it was also just it's just like a funny experience story. Yeah. People really appreciated that from the families that we heard about. So like that was one that we launched and tried to build, and we learned a lot from that. I think the main thing was like the problem with a task chore allowance app is not the app, it's like the philosophy behind it. It's like the people, like it's like we don't need a better to-do list, right? Like there's enough to-do lists. Like it's something else probably. It didn't really also, we kind of pivoted from that. We took a step back and then built the next app, which was also released in the App Store. We focused it just on kids, but anyone with a debit card could do it. Anyone with an existing bank account. So you have an existing bank account. We connected through Plaid. And what you would do is you would kind of, on a weekly basis, you'd have like goals you need to do, or like we call it, we ripped off the Apple ring, like the Apple like 10,000 feet ring, and said, hey, to complete your ring, you have to learn a little bit about financial education.
Makes sense.
You have to review your transactions. And we'd tell you like, hey, 2 weeks ago, you spent $20 at McDonald's. Like, how do you feel about that transaction now? We were trying to be more mindful about spending, kind of learning from Dan Ariely's was a Duke, his kind of books and his thinking about happiness and stuff like that. So we read a couple books and try to be like, okay, how do we apply these kinds of thinking to our application to help people learn about financial education and stuff like that. So we did that. We actually made revenue from that. We signed with a nonprofit. So that was like our first like dollar through the door, which is kind of wild. And we got like, I think probably close to 100 people to sign up. So we'd go out to the different events that the nonprofit hosted. Bolin would present. I'd kind of be in the back looking good, trying to get people to download the app as well. And like, we'd have like room full of parents and kids and we try to tell them about the vision of Zogo, about financial education, why it's important and how we can help each app. And then those are the two that we released, had some users, and then eventually switched to a model like Zogo, which is kind of like Duolingo for financial education. Our revenue model is through banks and credit unions. So we make all our money through banks and credit unions. Users don't really pay. We've since then launched a subscription. So like if you're not with a partner, you can kind of pay, but still majority of the revenue is through banks and credit unions. And that idea, if I remember correctly, Bolin was talking to some of our investors and he just like randomly started talking about like, maybe we could be the Wells Fargo Junior like youth account kind of process. And that was kind of, I think, the genesis of the idea of like, let's partner with banks and partner with credit unions. And then after that, we kind of we took some of the things we really liked. We realized like people really liked financial education. They really liked the idea of getting paid to learn through allowance. But the transaction piece was kind of hard, technically. And if we were integrating with the banks and credit unions, they didn't want to connect through Plaid on a standalone app. So we tried to connect to their digital banking, and that was a whole mess for a while.
That's where the Q2 stuff probably came about.
Yeah, the Q2 stuff came about like much later too. And it was just like, we thought about it from actually our first ever like a hackathon of like me sitting down and like building on a platform was a digital banking platform before we ever made Zogo. It was not Q2, it was one called Constellation out of North Carolina. And so like I just spent like a weekend hacking away at we took the app that was like our Plaid standalone financial education transaction app, spent the weekend taking a lot of that and then just turning into like a demo for Constellation and then presenting that for a while. And then we realized like that is good, but it's a really tricky thing to partner through a financial institution to do something inside their mobile banking app. So we took a whole step back and then said, what are the things that people really like about the solution? How can we make it even easier and more turnkey, something that credit unions and banks can launch in like 30 days kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that was what Zogo ended up becoming. We removed the transaction piece, focused on the financial education piece, and then made it a standalone mobile app.
Nice.
And then that was completely different. Like the first 3 months of that was like wildfire. That was like Bolin was able to sign 10 credit unions and banks like with no product, pre-product, just designs, pitch deck, as opposed to the 2.5 years we spent before that making like a couple $1,000s through a nonprofit. It was grind, 2 products that we'd launch out to the App Store. So it was night and day kind of experience.
One thing I just want to highlight is you went through probably 3 to 4 relatively polished MVPs, right? This is not pitch deck. You're like building app, putting app out in the app store, getting approval. At what point did you look, and you can pick any one of these or talk about all of them. At what point did you look at any one of those MVPs and products and say, hey, this is not working. We got to figure something else out. And if you did that, what made you decide this is not working?
Yeah. The first two where we kind of pivoted from like task and chore, like debit card task and chore app to then kind of personal finance. It's I'm trying to think if there's like a really good answer. Like I don't know if there's a clear answer for those. I really think that like the first one was kind of way too hard. So we couldn't actually, we took like, hey, we can't launch a debit card. So this something's going to have to change here. The task and chore app, I think it was maybe like after we launched and we'd gotten the 30 families and it was like, I don't know if the engagement is working. Like I think that was a big lesson.
Yeah.
I think that's what sparked the like, should we question this? Then the next question is like, is this,
if not this, then
oh yes, like if not this, then what? And it's also like, is this a fluke? Like, are these numbers right? Like, yeah. And
the reason I ask is it's very hard for someone who has an idea to say, hey, my idea sucks.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
really very hard for you to say, maybe what I built is a feature and not a full product.
Yeah.
And I just want to highlight that, hey, sometimes you have to look at the numbers and metrics and really figure out, is this working?
Yeah.
And if maybe we're just tracking the wrong things, maybe there could be a lot of scenarios, but realize that there's potential paths where something doesn't work out.
Yeah. I think that was a much harder decision for the one that's like a personal finance app where you're connected to Plaid and it's a little bit more like Mint-esque in the world.
Yeah.
And I feel like that could really work. And I'm trying to think like how we made that jump. And I think the big jump was probably just revenue model, like business model.
Yeah.
Like I think we probably had just pitched to credit unions. We were probably doing both, if I remember correctly. I think we were just doing both and we just found traction in banks and credit unions. And that, it's like, when we found that opportunity, we just kind of like latched onto that and then grew into that. I still think that like there's a B2C model of Zogo that kind of works out as well. Kind of that is a little bit more like Mint, or that is a little bit more like the Credit Karmas, the affiliate marketing, the a lot of the world. At some point, like I don't know why or how we made that decision. I think we got traction with credit unions and then latched on to wherever we had traction. So there's a weird balance between like being opportunistic, where when you see like people who have traction, or like someone who's willing to, who's interested as a buyer, like who can provide revenue. And then there's also like the little bit of judgment piece of like, are we looking at the numbers? Does this just make sense as well? Like a lot of that comes down to like, are the founders thinking about this in the right way? So it's tricky. The final pivot from like connecting to digital banking to building a standalone app, that one was a lot easier. And I think that was probably our most well-defined, like, hey, this is something here is not working. As we got in really strongly with a credit union and we were trying to integrate into their mobile app. We were trying to do what we wanted to do with transactions, but we got stuck in months of technology debate, and with their like VPs of digital and stuff like that, we got months in contracting. We got like, it was just a 1 year, 2 year launch cycle. And we were like, for our first launch ever, like this is just not going to work, right? Like, is this the business we want to get into? And so that was a little bit more methodical about like, what do they really like? What can we take away that is like, what do we like? What do they like? What is causing us issues, right? Like what is delaying us? And we were a little bit more systematic about that one. But the other ones, like I think boiled down to like the numbers, just
revenue money,
just like being judgment, like using our own judgment about what is useful in a product. And then also like we just got traction from banks and credit unions. So those are all different little flavors and pieces. And each decision was very different, I think is another thing to point out, is just like, you just have so many different things that you might latch onto at a different point to make a decision off that.
Another thing I wanted to ask, going a little step back a little earlier, you and your co-founder are working, you have multiple people coming in and out. When do you officially establish what the relationship is, what the equity split is, who's what? Because I know a lot of early stage founders, like, oh, let's work on something, and then there's some conflict, but they signed a 50-50 deal, and now they don't know who owns IP, and they didn't make all employees sign IP agreement, and they're like random issues that can occur, right? But how did you guys handle that, figure that out, and at what point, how much time into the journey were you like, okay, let's finalize this, set it in stone, sign something, whatever?
Yeah. No, this is a good question because this is something we probably did what most early stage founders kind of do is just like,
Hack a whip.
we like, yeah, we well, actually, I don't know what most would do. Maybe I take that back. But what we did was what, kind of like what you said is we just like incorporated super early before we had the idea of Zogo that Zogo is now, like maybe like the first product of like going to the school. So we were probably already incorporated by then, had like the agreements out, like invested in the lawyers and the accounting and all that kind of fun stuff. So we were probably super early there in a way that I don't think most people really need to be. We were 2 years before we became the Zogo that we were, and we'd already incorporated and investing and started and doing all that fun stuff kind of thing. So like we'd done a lot of that already, I guess. And then it does complicate things because we'd probably given out equity to people who we ended up like, it was before the cliff or something like that. It was like, this doesn't make sense. So that part definitely complicates things. What I would say is like, really until you start like having revenue or people that are really interested, it's probably not a good use of time to go do that. It could be fun to learn, right? Like there's that element of it, like, you know, going through the legal docs, like trying to talk to lawyers, like there's a learning process there, but is it going to really help you build and sell your product? Like not really, like it's not going to be like why you're there's so many reasons that your startup is not going to work, and like your corporate structure like that, like doing it early or later is not going to be like a meaningful differentiator, I think, in any way. So I would probably just say like focus on like once you start to get early clients, like just keep it like on your personal account. Like maybe this is bad tax advice, I don't know. But like just like whatever it is, like until
we'll add a disclaimer that this is not legal advice.
Yeah, like just I don't know, just consult the internet about your tax advice. I have no idea, but just like it's not a big deal until like maybe you start making a couple $1,000s and then start worrying about it, right?
The reason I ask is I feel like a lot of early stage founders fixate on structure, equity split, what title do you want, who owns the IP. And I think those are good things to do. I'm not saying don't do them. But like you said, if you don't have a product and you're not making money, what is the point of IP? What is the point of an equity structure for a company that's worth zero?
Yeah.
Right? And
I think that, I agree with you. And I think the bigger thing I would add is like, I've been talking to some people who are early in doing this. And the thing that I also add is that it's just like, it actually has a real cost to you, because it's like mental capacity. Like there's a cost to that. Not only is it not beneficial, but I think there's a very real distraction point from that. And so if you're spending your time arguing with your co-founder about some of these things or doing a bunch of stuff, like there's an element of like, hey, it's kind of fun to do that, to play house a little bit.
Yeah.
But if it's distracting you from actually doing your work, then like, I don't think about it. So well, the other thing I would say is like, I did have early stage conversations with people where I was actually involved in like exploring a startup. And we had these questions around IP and like, we'd not incorporated, this was after Zogo. I was I'm a laissez-faire kind of guy when it comes to this type of stuff. It's like, hey, whoever had the relationship first, you know, whoever emailed them, go for it. Or we could just like tell them like, hey, we're all working on this independently. We can all email him, or we all have access to the person for contacts like that we talk to in this IP experience. Cool. Or like any of the IP, I was just like, whoever made it can have it, or we can all share it. Like I was more of the opinion that like, just make it everyone's in early days, and that just makes things simple. So I'll throw that out there as well. Or you could just be like the person who made it. But I think it's easier to just be like, everyone has it. Let the market, like 3 people who are potentially co-founders figure out what to do with it later. Or like let the contact decide who they want to work with, right? Like
I also think from a point of view of IP, I feel like in software, ideas are dime a dozen.
Yeah.
I don't think there's really true IP unless you're doing like some really low level algo and something out of the ballpark. I feel like everything else is more or less buildable.
Yeah.
And in today's world, it's more execution than idea.
Yeah. That's why it's just like, there's going to be so many more reasons to die as a startup, where I'm just like, just every resource that we've made together, just anyone can use it. That's how we decided on one of the relationships that I'd done afterwards. Because we were figuring out, is there a business here? Do we want to work on this? And we'd done a bunch of work, and it was just like, maybe not.
Use it.
Yeah, like if anyone wants to use it, kind of stuff. So I'm kind of more like...
I feel like from a technical point of view, there's also like, hey, let's fork the code base from here. Up until here, whoever contributed can use it. But going forward, we're going to like fork it and start like building on top. And
yeah, there's that. The other...
like there's always options. I feel like it's just not worth the mental effort of like having that battle.
Yeah.
Because I think that's where it gets I don't know if salty is the right word, but that's where it gets a little weird in terms of you're spending time and effort protecting something that's theoretically worth nothing, but people get so bought up in it.
Yeah, I'm more like you on that, where I just feel like it's just mental energy going into a void that's just not productive. But sometimes it turns out to be meaningful. Sometimes, most of the time, it doesn't. I find, so I just don't want to worry about it. And if any way I could have helped this person build a successful business, then cool, right? Like then like that's my bragging rights. Like I'll sit around at a poker table and be like, yeah, you know that one product, like, yeah, so they ripped off my code, but like I'm not going to be angry about it, but it's just be cool.
Nice.
So I don't know. It's not a big deal, I don't think, most of the time. Long story short, I would wait until like revenue or something like that to be serious about it. And even then, like the other things like 4-year vests are usually good, like those types of simple things.
Yeah.
The other thing I think about equity or advisors is like, once you give a position of power, you give equity or you like give a role, it's really hard to take that back or like to decrease it. So it's something to think about. So like lots of people want advisors share even before they've provided any value. And it's hard. It's really nice as a founder to be like, oh, someone wants advisor shares, let me give them advisor shares. But like at the same time, like you kind of have to be a little critical about that kind of stuff too, is like,
what value are they truly bringing?
Yeah, it's like kind of boils down to the same thing with like early teammates, not employees necessarily, but just like early people who are helping and working out. And I've found consistently, by and large, like even like some of the most successful people that like helped us early in our career at Zogo and like just provided advice, did all that for free. They did it because they wanted to, and they provided the best advice. Whereas oftentimes like there was a very inverse correlation with like the people who asked most for advisor shares, who were the most expensive, often provided the least amount of value. And that I find that to be pretty true a lot.
Because they're also probably split across a lot of companies. They're probably really, at that point, they're probably only really giving you 2 hours a month or whatever the arrangement is. And how much value can you really bring to a business that you're only spending, if you're not spending time outside of the 2 hours, right?
Yeah. The other part of it is like, can we use that time reasonably too? And so like my tips and advice on that are just like, it's kind of like dating, right? Like you want to go through like, you know, make a 3-date rule of like, hey, we don't do any equity relationships until like 3 days or something like that. So like 3-4 hours. And then how do you make the best use of that 3 to 5 hours? Like I would say like there's high level advice and there's like low level advice, which is just like, hey, this is our website. Just give me advice on the website. Like, what do I change? What about the language? Here's my pitch deck. What would you change about the pitch deck? Here are my designs. Like be concrete in some of the places where you can get advice. And that's a useful way of getting more and more advice.
100%.
So I'd recommend that too, because that's something like early days, I was like, I don't even know how to use advisors. And I feel like I grinded a lot of gears about like, do I just sit and have a conversation with someone? Like there's a lot of benefit of that too. But like sometimes you get the real pieces of wisdom when they look at your work and they can say, I would change it this way and this is why. And so you get the wisdom plus the tactical action of like, oh, okay, this is an example of why like I should use less words or something like that. Like I don't know, right?
Yeah. I think what a lot of people, and I think even I'm not that great at this, when you have mentors, when you have advisors, you tend to spend time explaining the context and then asking the question. And I feel like knowing how to go straight into an hour-long advising session where you're just asking them, hey, here's the 3 problems I have. Here's my thoughts. What do you want to know?
Yeah.
And like, you don't need to give them context. They probably don't need the context. They probably know enough to be able to start answering your questions, and they will counter ask if they need more info. But a lot of people will waste 15, 20 minutes like, well, here's what I'm doing, and here's how I'm doing this, and here's what I need, and like, here's why we're building, and here's the TAM, and all that doesn't matter for the 3 problems you want to solve. Most of the context is probably useless. Yeah.
It's a really tricky, it's just a really tricky balance. Like you just never know what'll be useful, what'll not be. And like, you just have to like give it a best go. And if you have things that you can show people, like I think it helps. So yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What did you think about getting into a startup out of college, not making money, not being stable, so as to say, I don't know when's the like first paycheck you withdrew, probably 3-4 years in after you started doing the credit union stuff, right? What was that journey like? Did your parents ever question why you're doing it this way?
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. I think that maybe I was like really naive about it, I guess. I think there's like one part about it is when I was naive about it. And maybe the other part is like, funny enough, like super overconfident in my ability to get a job, like in the software industry, where I was probably a little bit more like, I think I can always get a job and I'm not that worried about it. So I can take some risks. And I feel like I was intentional about that thinking. Part of the reason why I think I was too self-confident about it is I never got an internship when I was freshman, sophomore year. Not because I didn't try. Like I tried to get internships with the big tech companies, but I just never got them. I got an interview or I'd go like on on-site, but I'd just never get the internship. But I still always believed for some reason, like I could get a job if I wanted to. So I was never really worried about that. And I feel like there was also this idea that like short-term risky behavior is longer-term less risky.
Yeah.
Or like people say this a lot, and I think I'm starting to say it, and I kind of believe it. It's just like the skills that you learn at the right types of startups, like even if you waste quote unquote 2 years like a startup that doesn't succeed, you'll probably end up learning a whole lot that might take you a lot longer to learn at some other companies. I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is if you're going to work somewhere that you really respect and like your manager. Like your manager has to be like a really, really smart person who respects and has ability to go do things. So you can do that at a big company or you can do that at a small company. But you'll just learn, the chances of you learning a lot, I think, short term are really good, and you'll have that information compound for a while. And I feel like that was something that I had in my mind. So I was not only like overconfident in my ability to get a tech job, I was like, I don't actually have a lot of money that I spend. Like I just don't spend a lot of money. I can live off a little bit. I'll always be able to get a software job. Like I'm not too worried about that. Plus, like I can take risks short term, and I think it's actually better for me long term. It just made me like okay with that personally. And I had conversations with my friends, like very like about this, where they were like kind of like, it was like they sat me down and was like, why are you doing this? Like, this is kind of stupid on some level. And I defended it, and I like talked to them about it in that similar way. It was like my roommates in my senior year of college. Yeah. I remember like having a conversation with them about this. Good on them for having that, because like if I was being stupid, then it's good to call someone out. But
yeah, I think the naivety is very important, especially when you know you want to make it, right? Because with the amount of like knowledge and information available today, I think it's very easy for someone to find a reason not to do something.
Yeah.
It's very, like, I could tell you 100 reasons why this idea is not going to work, either because of TAM or approach, whatever. But you got to have a little bit of that, I'm going to find a way to make it work.
Yeah.
Right? Or else it just never goes through.
It's just not going to work. Yeah. Right. Like there's I forgot what the saying was, but there's just some saying of like, frick, I'm going to butcher it, so I might not do it. But it was something like, if you don't believe that something, like you can make something happen, well, you're right, like it won't happen, or something like that. It's along the lines of like the belief kind of has to come before some of those things. It's a prerequisite. It's not a guarantee that it happens, but you have to have like a prerequisite amount of belief in something. So there was that part of it. And my dad was just supportive all around. Like my dad was pretty good about the whole startup scene in general. Like he'd always listen to these podcasts about like how I built this. He always listened to that, so I listened to a lot of that too.
Someday I'll get you on.
Yeah, dude. That would be wild. That would be so sick. I haven't listened to a lot of like JIRAs in a while, but like when I was in high school, I used to listen to them all the time, or like college. He did the TED Radio Hour too, so I'd listen to a lot of that. So my dad his mindset was always in there, and he was very supportive of all that. He's the reason I went into software. Like I was like no idea what to do, and he was just like study computer science, and I was like okay. He was very supportive about that. My mom just supports me regardless. She might not know what's going on all the time, but she loves to ask questions, and I love to answer them. And I think either way, they would support me regardless.
Where are your parents right now? What city?
They're in Mississippi.
Okay.
Clinton, Mississippi, the suburbs of Jackson.
Still running a restaurant, or?
Yeah, they're running a restaurant.
And you always have that fallback, right? Like worst case, you don't get a job, startup doesn't work out, you know you have a job there.
Yeah. I can always go. It's always nice to go back and just eat some good Indian food. At the very least, I could always stay at their home, eat food, and then I just wouldn't have to pay either, so I could just be unemployed in my parents' place too.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that, being an Indian household, I'm always comfortable with is worst case, even if I burn it all.
Oh yeah.
Don't listen to this. But like I try out ideas, get rid of all my savings. I know I can go to my sister's place. I know I can go to my parents' place, and no one's going to like kick me out. I'm not going to be on the street, right? And so like having that level of comfort, I think puts you in a better spot to take bigger swings, take bigger hits, try something more outlandish, and maybe that works, right?
Yeah.
And just having that comfort level, I think, is very important.
Yeah, no, I found comfort in that, and I think I was really lucky in that area. I don't know if all kids have that, or they might have it, but they might not feel it.
Yeah.
The other thing is like, there's two very different feelings, as well as like
100%.
having it and like knowing that your parents were there. So I always felt like my parents were there, and I have confidence that they would do it. I'm like, even though I'm always skeptical when other people tell me that they don't feel that their parents would do that for them, I think that they would. But sometimes I get the impression from other especially a lot of Indian people like that were from college, or like, it's a very common stereotype to be like, engineer, lawyer, doctor kind of thing. And that pressure is there for sure.
100%.
Even if you feel like your parents always have your back, that pressure is always there. Like, even as jokes, I feel like I saw it. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a funny thing. It's just, there's always that piece of it too from Indian families.
Going back to your journey at Zogo, you guys figure out that, okay, credit unions are working. I heard this thing where I think the summer during COVID, you guys hired a bunch of interns and just cold called your way into a lot of credit unions. How did you guys figure out how to go approach all credit unions and get in the doors? Because these are traditionally more conservative institutions, harder to get into, longer sales cycles. It's not like they're signing up to a SaaS subscription as soon as you convince them, right? So what was that process? Why did you go this route of, I don't know if it's guerrilla marketing, but like getting interns and calling your way into doors? But
Yeah. Did you see that off Boland's LinkedIn? Do you remember?
No, I actually met someone who used to work with you guys.
Oh, really?
At some networking event 2 years ago, and he talked about this.
Oh, okay. Is it Jacob Young, maybe?
Probably.
Okay.
Jacob sounds familiar. I'll have to look it up on my...
No, Jake's a good friend. Yeah, I talk to Jake all the time.
I think he's working on some finance idea. Last I talked to him.
Okay, then that was like 99% sure Jacob Young. Yeah. So... yeah, we did do that. Boland to Boland's credit, he was really good at this type of stuff. He's a big sales marketing guy. He's and he just has a way. He's also got a really great product sense. I hate calling it just sales marketing because he's just a really good founder, to be honest. Like, he's got a lot of good ideas. Maybe it was part of like stem from like the early days of Zogo, like of like having 20 people and like having kind of like, finding people who ended up doing the work, and then you kind of keep them. Maybe that's like there's some value to that, and maybe there's more method to that madness than maybe I gave it credit for. I don't know. So maybe it's just like a repeat of that with a particular sales marketing tactic of like maybe a bunch of interns to go do that. Plus, it's like we didn't have that much cash, right? Like we're still 20-year-old kids who's still starting this business. We used to have some form of revenue, but like
it wasn't enough to burn on like expensive marketing.
Yeah, it's like we can't hire like a sales rep who is like already graduated to do type of stuff. So we had a lot of college interns to kind of do that. We did have some money from our credit unions, but we didn't really have like enough to hire full time all the time to kind of go do all that stuff. So there's some element of like we needed to make it work with what resources we had. And the other piece is just like Boland was pretty good at just having a little bit of guerrilla tactic mentality.
Makes sense.
And the last part that I'd also highlight is like a lot of our messaging and the way we resonated with financial institutions was, we are Gen Z, like we are young adults, like to bring the next generation of your customer at credit unions, like we are that customer, right? So if you want the next generation, this is how
makes sense.
We interact and do that. And banks are a little bit more conservative. The credit unions are a lot more like receptive to Zogo, especially in the early days. So like credit unions are like, the easiest way to explain is like a not-for-profit bank for anyone who doesn't know much about credit unions. And they invested heavily in financial education. They invest in the member experience.
Nice.
Like they're just very positive people to work around, and they really saw that vision. They were bought into that vision as well. So that helped.
Were you guys ever worried about the TAM not being big enough? Because if I'm correct, there's only 400 or 500 or 550 credit unions in I don't know the exact number, but there's a limited amount of credit unions. And so theoretically, if you sell to everyone, that's a cap on how much you could make per year.
Yeah, the TAM is a funny thing. So there's actually 4,000 credit unions.
Okay.
So but they have a huge range of like,
managing 10 million to managing 10 billion.
Yeah, there's a huge range there. So there's probably still like a couple hundred financial institutions that are like in the couple $1 billion range that, if you let's say if you do maybe I shouldn't do all this mental math and real quick. But like, you could start to work out some numbers and is it venture backable? Probably not. Might be. Like, if it's a venture backable business, you're kind of making a bet that you're going to make money not from just this financial education product, like from
you're going to build out a
direction.
Suite,
a direction. And we started talking a lot about this as like, what is the direction of not just financial education? There's a big conversation, debate, and product roadmap stuff that we did is just like, do we start teaching people all types of education, not just financial education? And can we get other people, not just banks and credit unions, to sponsor that education? So like an example would be like, would Google sponsor software engineering courses on Zogo? We were also thinking a lot about this notion of like learning and earning. So you learn and someone is like financing your education. So like schools and colleges, this is really big into the college world. It's like you pay colleges to learn. And you go to a college to get a job. Right? Can we somehow get the job provider to pay you to start learning for their job and like skip the middleman altogether, right?
Makes sense,
that was like part of the vision we were starting to explore. And like that's a pretty big like
task.
Yeah, but it's a big task, right? Like there's you can start
so many things you got to figure out, and how does that work?
A lot of unknowns, but you can start to finagle the question around TAM that way too. Yeah. Not finagle it, because that kind of makes it sound like you're not earnest about it, but there's an earnest way to be like, there's a business here that can actually potentially be venture backable. It's hard. So we were exploring that. We were also exploring like, can we just start building more and more software for financial institutions? Can we go inside the mobile banking application, kind of the Q2s, the Alchemies of the world, where we start to be like embedded finance, bring like kind of fintech mentality and product experience into the existing financial institutions? That you can start to say, okay, now I have 8,000 financial institutions. Maybe let's say like 1,000 of them are worth 20 grand a year or something like that. And then that starts to be like 1,000 institutions, 20 grand, it's 20 million ARR, right?
Yeah.
And that's like very
like
back.
$100 million company.
Yeah, it's very like, might be conservative numbers. So 20 grand a year is like not a whole lot for some of these financial institutions. So you can start to be like 40 grand, 40 million, right? Like there's a business here. And so it's not like super small regardless, but when we were like pre 1 million ARR, it's like good to be like, is there a path to 1 million ARR or to 3 to 5 million ARR? That's enough, right? Like that's enough for us to like go and be a business. And you'll start to learn more about customer problems and see like, and you also sort of go upstream. Like some of these big financial institutions like the Chase, Amex, Chimes of the world, their contract sizes are bigger, right? Like they just are willing to spend so much more money for that type of stuff. And so that's a good way to scale revenue too. So
I like it how a lot of people think doing TAM calculations are like, I need this giant ass Excel model. But sometimes it just starts with, let's say this person paid me 20 grand a year and we got 1,000 of them. And like it starts as really basic napkin math, and it's a good way to just judge whether you see a path or not, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to, again, I need to go build a financial model and do this and go get a fractional. Like people add all these blockers to like figuring stuff out, where sometimes it could be as easy as, hey, there's 4,000 unions. Let's say we get 500 of them and we can make them pay X amount per year. There's at least an achievable target, because it's not an absurd thing to ask a credit union to pay 5 grand a year for education, right? Yeah. Even if you start conservative, I think it's a good approach just to get some numbers on the book to know whether you're working in the right way.
Exactly. And then like, are some of those numbers going to be useful enough to like try to raise a round? I don't know, right? Like then that starts to get the trickier stuff. But like, you can convince me that it's worth caring about. Like I, as an advisor, will help someone say, oh, whoa, there's a business here potentially. Like I'll help and do whatever I can to kind of do that. And then it's also good to know for yourself, like, is this going to get hard stuck at like, and I think usually you'll get a better sense of, is this going to be a business at all when you can't get any clients after years anyway? Like that's going to probably be the bigger issue. Not that the market's not big enough. It's just like, there's probably no market at all to begin with, right? Like it's like, I probably can't find willing buyers, or I can't build the product to get the willing buyers and things like that. That's probably going to more likely kill your business and your lifestyle than it is like, oh, this market will only make me $10 million a year. Like that's crazy, right? Like $10 million is a lot of money. Like even a business that gets 1 million ARR, like that's life-changing amount of money.
100%.
Right. So like, I find a lot of that, especially with early stage founders, like it's like, I find it a little funny to be like, oh, this business is like, you know, when they think the TAM is too small, it's like, how small is too small? It's like you wouldn't build a business for 3 million a year. Like unless you're like really have a path forward of like hell bent on finding a business that like meets these prerequisites. And then like, how do you make that decision? Like, are you confident enough in your data to suggest that this business will make $10 million a year? I don't know. It goes into kind of this weird rabbit hole of like, I don't know.
I 100% agree. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I also fundamentally believe that you gotta make your first amount of money, whether it's from a million business, whether it's from a 2 million, whether it's from a 500K business that you sell for 3x revenue. You gotta make that first check to put yourself in a more comfortable spot to then be like, hey, my second business, if it's lesser than 20 million, I don't want to do it because I want to, you know, go the next level, go up.
Yeah.
But like you can't start from zero and be like, it's either a billion or nothing.
Yeah.
Which I understand because again, there's the whole, you can't raise money, you can't succeed. And there's like all this like stuff that floats around. I'm very happy building $1 million ARR business, especially if it's my first company.
Yeah. Like fucking do it. Like that's sick. Yeah.
I mean, it's a good outcome. And if I sell it, I sell it. If I don't, I'm still making $1 million. I'm probably making 10, 20% on that. That's more than enough.
Yeah. The other thing I would think about is like, I started doing this myself. I never really got anywhere with it, but like, if you have the confidence to like, oh, this is $1 million business, that's too small. It's just like, okay, then like do it, but do it as fast as you can. Can you do it in 3 months? Like, cause if you can, that's sick, right? Like then you can just, then it's a different way to play the game.
100%.
Whereas as opposed to like having the game be like a large amount of money in an indeterminate amount of time, see if you can make that smaller amount of money in a finite amount of time. So I thought that's a really good way of flipping the script. It never really worked out for me because I didn't do any of that, but like you could do that for sure. So
in the journey of Zogo, you guys are onboarding credit unions, COVID hits, and you guys were acquired by private equity. I don't remember when.
2021.
I think.
So yeah, two and a half years ago.
Can you say what ARR you were at when you got acquired and why make the decision to get acquired?
Yeah.
What was that process? Did someone reach out? Were you guys actively looking to be bought, or how did that happen and why make that decision?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I should say what number we were at, but we were a profitable business. We had about, what I could say is like we had about 20 people and we were profitable.
Okay.
And we didn't really raise like a significant amount of money. We had money through angels and we went through Techstars and things like that, but we didn't raise like...
Techstars Austin or?
We did Techstars, Carry, MetLife, the insurance company.
Yeah.
So we were like about 20 people, about like profitable. And then that's when you start to like... I'm seeing a lot of this with hindsight, right? Like when, like how I assess the situation now. I don't know exactly how we were thinking about it then, but like, you know, you can start to then say, once you're at that place, is like, is this a lifestyle business? Is this a money that like, is this a product where like I can kind of grow revenues? You kind of have to have an understanding of like, what is the potential from there, right? Like, can I raise money and grow revenue 3x in the next year? Like, is that something the market can handle? Right? Like, is there an opportunity to do that? This is where you start to get a little bit more into like the market analysis, like understanding. Once you have that type of decision making, it's like, is that an option? It could make sense. If we raise money and go do that, is that for Zogo, the financial education product for financial institutions? Or is that for, let's take on learning in colleges and education entirely, right? Then you have to start to flip, like, what are you going to use this money for? And it's almost like a next business, right? Like you're really like in the next phase of like, do we then go to Google and say, hey, can you sponsor some education courses on software engineering or something like that? And I think we tried some of that too, but I don't know. When we try some of that, it's like, did we spend enough time doing that? Did we invest enough in that? Or is this just not a valuable? It's just not a reasonable thing. So we always made those type of judgment too. It's complicated. But that is when we start to ask ourselves, do we continue growing in the financial institution space? If so, is that venture backable, or is this something like we're profitable? Having an extra $1 million is probably not going to help us that much more. Do we continue growing there? Do we invest the money into start doing other types of growth for the business that's not financial institution focused. We were kind of getting to that point where we're thinking about those decisions a lot. At the same time,
That would decide the next phase of your journey.
yeah, that's like when do we start like focusing energy on something else? And at that time, we were also starting to do like digital banking integrations. Like, do we integrate more into financial institutions and then become like connected to transaction data, connected to like the consumer at a bank or credit union, that type of stuff. So all of those things are kind of in our mind at that point in time. And then like if I take a step back now and I look at that, it's like, yeah, you're kind of starting to make a decision of like, do you kind of want to make another run at a company, kind of like you're rebuilding yourself as a company, or do you want to focus more on scaling revenues with your existing core product? Normally, you can kind of make those decisions independently, kind of, but we are using the same app to do that. So the same user experience or branding and messaging kind of gets messed up too, things like that. So we had a slightly different situation. You can kind of think of it that way too. So like, I don't know, there's just a lot of thoughts. I've said a lot of words, right? Yeah. But like, there's a lot to think about in that situation.
Because I think one thing that I'm picking up is you're at this point where you're like, okay, we either have to grow this company and make more money, which we have to figure out how to do, or we start building adjacent products, which are bets you're going to take. You got to build our product engineering teams, and those bets could fail.
Yeah.
So then what's your plan B? What's your plan C? And so you're going on to a different phase, which is a very different challenge than where you've been to, right?
Yeah.
And what I like to say is like the 0 to 1 is a different problem than the 1 to 10, than the 10 to 20.
Yeah.
And like all these are different problems, different skill sets, different company structures. You got to scale differently. You have different things that you got to care about. And it sounds like that you were at one of those pivotal points of like, we either go all in again and try to figure this out, or we find an exit.
Yeah. Yeah. So we started, I think the way you said it was way better for than what I did. It's like we had the inkling of a 0 to 1 with the Zogo app for financial education for financial institutions. Someone should be definitely scaling that from 1 to 10. And then the question is it too much of a distraction for us to start scaling try 0 to 1 somewhere else?
Yeah.
Is it a distraction or is that the right call? Because it's hard to do that, right? Like
100%.
It took me, Bolin, and Simon a couple years to do it once, right? Like, are we supposed to now do it again while also managing 1 to 10? Are we supposed to find other people to do that? Like, that's even low probability. And then we just found a partnership with Peak 6 is the firm that acquired us, and it just made a lot of sense, right? Like,
Makes sense.
So that is like, we were planning for our own business, and we found an opportunity that made a lot of sense, and so we partnered with Peak 6 to kind of do that, and that was good too, because like when a company at our stage gets bought like that by a company like Peak 6, like it would be it doesn't make that much sense to buy the business and like mess it all up. Kind of, does that make sense? Like, that's just like, this doesn't make sense. It's too early to do that, right? Like if we were a business that was like making 10 million, 20 million ARR, like 30 million, 40 million ARR, like, had like the biggest banks in the world, then it's a little bit more like, I think it's different. Maybe you still don't want to mess it up then. I don't even know what messing it up means, right? But like, you want to be more entangled with it. But Peak 6 runs very effectively as an independent firm too. So like, the partnership just made sense for us, and Peak 6 was like definitely invested in us after the acquisition too. Like, let us
and so you guys stayed on for 2 years, and
we stayed on, and like they gave us space to like invest. We made a lot of 0 to 1 bets like as Zogo, and we were still able to kind of grow in that. And the same people were able to do that growing. Like Bolin was still involved, and I was still involved, and Simon was still involved for a while. And so like we were able to like execute on some of the 0 to 1 ideas that we had, like going to digital banking. And not only were we able to execute on that, we felt like Peak 6 was investing in us to do that, like through their own capital, through their own time, through their own mentorship and stuff like that too. So like we were able to do digital banking integrations. We started launching with fintechs with like our third-party API integration. So like now you can use financial education via API. We could partner with a sister company from Peak 6 as well, like Apex Learn, to go do that. And so there was and we also used started making crypto accounts through a sister company, through Apex Crypto, stuff like that. I'm saying a lot of words, but like we were able to do like a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. It opened up opportunities and channels for you guys that would not have been as easy to open before the acquisition.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And not only just like access to those opportunities, but like people who would help us back us, like not just through money, like through investments, but also just philosophically is like, yes, like, it's hard to find support to take bets. It's like having an own in-house VC kind of to help you do that. So we were able to do a lot that way too. At the same time, still grow our financial institution business and make sure financial education for members and customers like in the US is just improving that. So
pretty cool.
Yeah.
And you guys recently left and you started SwayStack, right?
Yeah, I did. I think Bolin and Simon they're still
at peak. Yeah.
No, they're not at peak 6, but I think they're still trying to figure out what they
want to do.
Yeah, what they're up to.
Why jump back in? Why start something else?
I don't know. So I was unemployed for like 4 months. So like most of 2024, I was just kind of like hanging out. And like I hung out, did some cool stuff. Like I traveled with my family. I went back to India for a while too because my parents were visiting. I did some form of traveling. I learned how to play the piano a little bit, get some of those.
Enough to show off at a party.
Yeah. Get like Christina Perry's 1,000, is it 1,000 years? Something like that. 1,000 years. That song really slaps for some reason for me. Or like just like a nice little couple piano, like the Fur Elises of the world. Like I did a little bit of like that. And like that was all fun, but I was getting a little bored at some point too. Like I was taking a lot of walks and like I was talking to a lot of cool founders and cool ideas. And so I was like almost kind of putting on like my little VC hat of like evaluating an idea. Cause like if you think about like a startup founder, like anyone who's working at an early stage startup is like, on some level, you should be thinking about it kind of as a VC and you're thinking about investing your time and energy into that. So I was doing a lot of that just like kind of naturally by talking to people in Austin and stuff like that. And I met my co-founder actually through Jacob Young. He introduced us. And we talked about it like a year ago and we were just kind of talking and kind of stumbled into the idea of what SwayStack is. And it just made sense. Like
Makes sense.
It was just like financial institutions kind of need this. We talked to a bunch of financial institutions and like, they just really, they're struggling with marketing. They need help like personalizing their engagement, making automated campaigns. And a lot of like the smaller financial institutions, like what we found is like sometimes they just don't have digital, they don't have bandwidth and they just won't have digital campaigns because it's so hard.
Yeah.
And it's
also a lot of smaller banks and funds don't have like a tech team doing their shit for them, right? Like if you're using something like Q2, you're not really like innovating product. You're just like dependent on Q2 and the Q2 ecosystem to get shit done, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that was like stopping financial institutions from doing this critical part of their business, right? Technology, resources, expertise, because then like the person who decides who the campaign should be sent to is different than the person who makes the content for those campaigns. And then you have tech limitations on how to send those and things like that. And so like we just wanted to make that process easier to help financial institutions be like, hey, these are the audiences that I want to send campaigns to. Like we can do like a simple example of like when you open up a new account at a bank. I think a lot of the banks, the big banks, fintech, the neobanks, they've gotten good at like reminding you to set up direct deposit, telling you the benefits of their checking account, cross-selling you into other products, having those automated journeys and things like that. And we find like a lot of financial institutions don't have that and they need that.
Makes sense.
And so we want to make it super easy to help them figure out who to target with their different campaigns, how to target with their different campaigns, making it easy with like one-click campaigns, providing a template of libraries and doing all that kind of stuff. So it just made a lot of sense. And I was like, I was very opportunistic in that. Is like, I was kind of looking for stuff, but not really. If there wasn't like a great idea, then like that I felt inspired to go do, then like, I wasn't too bothered by it. But this just made sense. And Harai is a good partner too. And so we decided to like kind of sign it on this business, and so I'm back in it now.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like to towards the end some rapid fire questions, so just fire at me. But what are 3 resources that you would recommend to someone listening?
There's a guy named Jason Lemkin from SaaStr, SaaStr. He has like a course actually on his like website that's completely free.
Okay.
We'll
link everything in the show notes.
So I think like that was really sick. I did that post Zogo before SwayStack and just spent 3 days like going through all that content. Fantastic content. So I really, really liked that. I think other good one. I read this book a while back too, and I've been rereading and I really like it too. It's Poor Charlie's Almanac by Charlie Munger.
Third time I've heard that this week. But
oh, really?
Yeah.
This week? Yeah. It's really good. It's probably because like Charlie Munger recently passed away this year, and Stripe Publishing republished their book, and so I got a copy of that too. And so like I just like reading Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. I did a lot of that back when I was in college too. Like my freshman year, I read The Intelligent Investor and like the Random Walk Down Wall Street, and I was like, how do I like these just seem cool? And I got a lot of like the Warren Buffett like quips and stuff like that. One or two that I really like. I'm not doing a good job at rapid firing answering. That's fine. But that's a really good one. I'm trying to think another. I really liked Working Backwards. Have you heard of that one?
No, I haven't.
Okay, that's good because this is the new one. This is by, I think it's like Jeff something and like Jim Collins.
Okay.
It's two early employees at Amazon. And so Amazon has that, like, if you've ever heard Working Backwards in the marketing press release, like it kind of just goes into Amazon culture. And I just thought it was a really well-made book. You learn more about Amazon's culture and like,
nice. I'll add that to my list.
Yeah, it's just a lot of good information.
What would you say is your startup stack or tech stack? How do you run your startup?
Just like anywhere and everywhere, like
yeah. So like go
okay.
top down, like Notion, JIRA, GitHub, the full.
You've been using Notion, Figma, Google Drive, AWS for like our tech stack stuff, Gmail, it's a good one. The Google Workspace.
Highly recommend.
Yeah, Gmail's been good. I never really used. I'm sure there's better email clients like the Superhumans of the world. I just never really used them. Figma's big. I think those are all big. I use a Mac. I like the Mac. I really want like the M2 Airs. I haven't gotten one of those. I have one of the like the M1 MacBook Pros from like 2020 or 2022 or something like that. It's 2022 probably. I'm trying to think, dude. I use Microsoft Edge. I've been using Bing now because people have been saying that like Bing has gotten really good.
Interesting.
Maybe not anymore because of like the whole like I don't know, Google Labs is trying to do their thing, but ChatGPT through Bing has been pretty good.
Okay.
I've had a good time doing that.
Apparently OpenAI is building their own search engine, I heard, which they're going to launch in a couple of weeks, so I don't know.
Yeah, I've been using a lot of ChatGPT as well. I usually have Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude open.
Yeah.
I pay for ChatGPT, but I don't really pay for Claude yet.
Have you tried Poe?
No, but I've used, I think I used it a while back, but it's not one of my pinned tabs that I always use. Is it worth doing?
So I think if you want to use multiple, and if you don't want to do a lot of code interpretation, then Poe is good to like, gives you a lot of options. Like you can pay $20 a month for Poe and like you just do Claude or you do ChatGPT 4 or you do whatever. So it has like every LLM you could need under the hood. Yeah. And then people have built custom agents on top.
And you don't have to pay for each one individually?
No, you just pay Poe $20 a month, Whoa. 25, whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's some limitations with the interpreter. Like I've heard ChatGPT's interpreter is better with code than like Poe's. Yeah. So there's trade-offs, but like, I mean, I would just do Poe and try everyone, and then you find one, then you go use that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. But yeah. Oh, I also use Dynalist. Okay. Dynalist is just like, it's just like a fancy bullet point thing. So I use my to-do list on there. Okay. Or if I also have my to-do list on Notion, like, we haven't used Linear yet, but I use Linear in my old at Zogo and like probably use Linear once we actually have more engineering going on. Nice. That's like modern day fancy version of JIRA. Yeah. Yeah. So I really enjoyed that.
Nice. What would you say is your support system? What allows you to take risks, build companies, just keep being an entrepreneur?
Just good friends and family is like 99.9% of the journey. Like if you can, you should be, the work part is fun and it's also stressful. So like one way of thinking about it is you can kind of, I don't know, maybe this isn't a good way of thinking about it, but like if I spend all my time working and it's like not successful or anything like that, like I still have lived hopefully a happy life with friends and family. Like I think
that makes sense.
I think that's really important. Friends especially, because like sometimes it can be hard with family if it's not around. So you definitely really need good friends if you're not around your family physically, or otherwise like my mom and I call all the time because she would get mad if I don't call. Plus it's kind of fun to call her sometimes, as much as that can sound weird. But anyway, like I think also like some form of physical energy, like going to the gym has been super helpful too, is that you just feel like mentally clean and physically clean too. So I think those are good. So like weights, friends, family, it's probably good food. Like that's much support that I think like.
Nice. So I do this bit where I ask everyone a last question from the previous guest, and then I'll ask you a question. So your question is, how do you be persistent and resilient to get through the tough times? And then how would you teach that to someone?
How do you do it is an interesting one. I think I've been reading this book called The Righteous Mind. It's a good book also, I would recommend. It's less startup-y, but like, I think like your mind just has to get good at reacting in a way that's resilient. Like, I don't know if like, is kind of a weird answer, but I
Yeah.
think your brain just, it has a level of intuition and it has a system of reasoning. Your intuition guides like most of your actions.
100%.
Your reasoning, this book suggests, I don't know how legit it all of it is, it pretty much just suggests like your reasoning functions to just kind of re-support your intuition most of the time, unless you're very conscious about not doing it, like in a lot of cases. So like, I think your brain just has to get good at doing that and being resilient, and then you'll make up reasons for why you're resilient.
Makes sense.
So I think I'm dodging the first half of the question by just saying you just have to train your brain to do it. And that puts more emphasis on the latter half of the question, which is like, how do you train resilience? I think you just have to constantly take little loops of success and failure. A good way of doing this, I found, is like games. Like I played a lot of games in college and in high school. And when I'm talking like lame games, like Call of Duty and like Fortnite, like your first person shooters of the world, I'd played like the competitive versions of them. Like it's not like super serious or like well, at least not all the time. Like I'd play like some private games, like a bunch of tryhards where like they do the thing. And, like you're not playing for any rankings. You're just playing with people who care about rankings. And anyway, it's like there's a lot of that. But I think you have really good cycles of failure and like trying stuff, and then you'll do your very absolute best and you'll still lose, and that's important skill to learn. You just learn to be resilient that way. I think that's really important. Games, like very fast iteration cycles, are very important, and I think games are really good at that.
Nice.
Otherwise, like hearing from the stories of a lot of other entrepreneurs is really good too. Just learning from history, from either biographies or just like crazy historical situations, like Alexander the Great went to war to go do all this crazy shit and then died at 30 and like did all this stuff. And you know, like you'll start to just, I think at least I think you'll start to just gain an appreciation for how hard life can be and how good life can be in a lot of different ways. And it just provides a better context for like, you know, maybe this isn't the biggest thing in the world, or maybe this is an important thing in the world. And
100%. I like that. I like that analogy
there. So
what's your last question for my next guest?
That's a really good question. I was thinking about the content question, but you've kind of asked that. Maybe like who is like the last like advisor or mentor that you think like really took the time out of their day? Like someone who just helped you out, someone who's a little bit more successful, just did something that helped you out. Like that's a very kind thing for you. Something, I guess, is probably what I'd say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. But no, thank you for coming on. I had a great conversation. Where can listeners find you? What do you want to plug? What can we link in the description?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. I'm a singer. IMASINGHER. Or you can just like connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find our website, SwayStack.com. That's probably the big ways.
Yeah. Anything you want to plug? Anything going on?
Other than SwayStack,
are you raising? You want to talk to customers or still figuring shit out?
Yeah. Talking to customers would be the best. So like if you know any community banks or credit unions, like that'd be great. Namely in like digital banking or marketing, but you know, CFOs and CEOs always make decisions happen. So that's always great. Other than that, like if you have feedback on the site, like that's always good. Or if you just want to chop product or like talk marketing, that's just always useful. Especially if you've kind of been product at a financial institution that's like helping people engage with your product, doing onboarding, things like that. That's always useful. We're not raising right now. We're still kind of early, but we'll always be happy to chat with people who are willing to invest or looking in that space. We're focusing more on getting our first customers. And so if someone's interested in investing, we'll probably, you know, reach back out to them in a couple months when we feel a little bit more ready to go do that. But we'll always love any interest there, any conversations with people in the space. So yeah, it's
pretty cool. Yeah. But no, I think that's it. Thank you for coming on, and we'll link everything you said in the description.
Cool.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning into Funds and Founders. If you're a local Austin founder, a venture capitalist, or just someone who's building and in the middle of their journey and would like to be featured on an upcoming episode, submit your guest pitch to abhinavsinha.podcast@gmail.com. If you have a founder-specific event you'd like to promote on the podcast, you can also reach out to me. If you want to continue to get support through your founder journey, hit the follow button, and I'll see you in the next episode.